Hey, Foot Clan, I wanted to let everybody know about a new podcast from Gimlet Media called The Pitch. It's a show where real entrepreneurs pitch real investors for real money. The Pitch is a fascinating listen. It takes you through the high-stakes world of business wheeling and dealing, and it doesn't shy away from the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to make a deal and what happens after the pitch is over. Season 2 of The Pitch is just starting, so subscribe to The Pitch wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, this is Allen Robinson from the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you're listening to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast, coming to you from the FantasyJocks.com studios with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
That's right. We're all back in the building.
Good to be back, America.
Good to be back.
Skip up.
Mike is here.
What's going on, everybody?
Now, Mike, it's just like riding a bike, okay? Just get back on.
And fall off.
You can do it.
It's full steam ahead, fellas. I'm not concerned in the slightest.
Thursday, June 29th. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Andy, Mike, and Jason back in the building. No Jay Grizz.
He's foraging.
He's foraging. But we're back, and we have a great show for you today. Bounce back players. We're each going to present to you our case for 2 bounce back players. So we'll have 6 of those to bring your way. We have a good quick question, and we'll get into the Foot Clan mailbag as well. So we're very excited to get started here. So let's do that. This is a quick question today, who is your favorite NFL offense for fantasy football?
So to clarify, this is our favorite. This is not we're saying this is the best. Get all of these guys. This is our favorite.
Yeah, just the ones that we find ourselves liking the players on, right?
Sure. I'll jump in here first since I was gone on the last show.
We miss you.
You just need to get a word in?
Yeah. My favorite NFL offense for fantasy football, Washington. I like everything about them. I think they're a very high-powered, very potent offense. And on top of that, I like the fact that you can get these guys later in drafts where you have the Green Bay Packers. You got to spend a first or a second-round pick to get Jordy, a third to get Devontae Adams, which I like all those guys.
And
Rodgers, you have to pay up for everyone, though. Meanwhile, over in Washington, Kirk Cousins threw almost 5,000 yards last year. He's going to be a 8th, a 9th-round pick. We don't know who the top wide receiver option is, but that's kind of baked into the ADP where Terrell Pryor, he's likely, probably a 4th-round pick come draft time, but huge upside. Jamison Crowder.
Huge upside.
He's going to be 8th, 7th, 8th-round pick. Josh Doxson, we don't know, but huge upside with him as well. He's basically free. Jordan Reed.
You got the bargain of the elite tight ends.
So let me ask you on the Washington running backs. Right now in the 8th round, they're both going basically almost next to each other. You can choose Rob Kelly, the incumbent, the starter, looked good at the beginning of last year, looked terrible at the end of last year, or your pain bot, Samaje Perine. You're taking one of those guys, and every draft that I've done, I've got to the point where I go,
which do I want?
I think if I'm on the clock right now, I would take Rob Kelly because I think that he will be the starter to begin the year. My love for Samaje Perine is well documented on this show, but I still think that Rob Kelly played well enough that they will give him a chance. Samaje will eventually take over and be the 2-down back for that team, but if I'm drafting, I want the guy who's going to give me help right now, and then whoever spends the draft pick on Samaje goes 3 weeks with him doing nothing, then either drops him or I'll trade for him.
Get him cheap, yeah. All right, I'm going to go with the you went with the late round ADP value team. I'm going glitz and glamour. I'm going the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
Open the limo door and out walks Matt Ryan, Devonta Freeman, and Julio Jones. You talk about the holy trinity of fantasy points on a team, and I love an offense, and in consideration was Washington. I do like them. New England, obviously. But you have a potential number 1 wide receiver, a potential number 1 running back, and then a potential, we saw this, top 3 type of quarterback. And I am firmly in the camp that believes that the beat will go on for the Atlanta Falcons offense this year. And so I'll say my favorite fantasy offense is Atlanta. Taylor Gabriel is a nice sleeper pick.
Oh, yes.
Has the potential to, Austin Hooper, you never know. But those three, Tevin Coleman obviously as well, but those three big guys,
yeah,
they get my attention.
Yeah, I mean, obviously those two teams have a lot of fantasy-relevant assets. Makes sense to be favorites. Ironically enough, this is great why we have the three differing opinions here on the show, because I see regression for both of those offenses this year.
You do. You've been vocal about it. Incorrectly vocal about it.
And very, very, very well could be incorrect on that. My team that I'm going with, it's similar to yours, Mike, in the sense that I just think there's so many guys that I like where they're being drafted at. They're being underdrafted, and that's the Colts. Andy, you think
who's being underdrafted besides Frank Gore?
Oh, well, Frank Gore. I think Moncrief is being underdrafted.
You could make an argument that Andrew Luck is being underdrafted.
That's what I was going to say. Andy thinks that Andrew Luck is being – the only guy that's really going
Moncrief?
at
Did
the
you
value –
say that?
Yeah, no, I said Moncrief. The only guy that's going at the value that's like you're already paying for him to succeed is T.Y. Hilton.
Sure.
I mean, even Doyle is a value right now in
about
drafts.
Jack Doyle.
He rules.
He does rule.
I think Eric Swope is also a value if you're in a crazy deep league.
Yeah. And he's got the Kamar Aiken. Come on.
Andy has finally been rising on Dante Moncrief. You told me in the office, and
it's true.
I was very happy about it.
And I want to. This is a good segue because I made a number of changes. Probably 20 to 30 players got moved around. Not all of them dramatically. A couple spots here or there. Yesterday, I made a few more changes to our rankings, and Tyrod Taylor moved up. And a lot of the reaction on Twitter was, "Oh, what happened? What happened in Buffalo where Tyrod deserves to move from, I think he was 22 and now he's 16 or something?" Nothing happened. But what I want people to understand out there is that this is the time of year in which we're deep diving player to player, and no, Maclin didn't go to Buffalo like we had hoped. But I was deep diving on Tyrod a little bit more, and I looked at week-to-week consistency. Actually pulled up the fantasy finish charts in the UDK, and I said, wow, a little more impressed than I thought. Players shuffle around. They move around. We're establishing those values, and it would be intellectually stupid of us on your behalf to have our rankings permanent based on February or March or April when we put our first initial rankings out there. So there's more movement now that is not injury or hype related than there will be later when movement will happen more dependent on, oh, man, he lost Sammy Watkins again, or Jordy Nelson went down, so I'm going to take Aaron Rodgers down, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, I think it's actually more indicative of a good move. When you see someone change in our rankings I haven't heard any news on what's going on, that probably means we were diving deep on this player because this is what we spend our lives doing full time, and we realized that we were probably wrong. And so when you see that ranking adjusted as opposed to following a hype train, it's usually a really good move for us when the year comes around.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a few months sometimes with certain players for us to slough off our biases of how they ended the year.
Hard.
We make that joke about, you got to be able to forget what they've done to you and move on. But if a player ended the year bad and then you get a chance to dig deep and look at the week to week, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I need to give Tyrod a little more respect than I was giving him. And the reality was Sammy Watkins does look a little bit better now.
We'll certainly be talking about him very soon.
From a health standpoint. And so I felt a little, it's like Martavis. I moved Martavis because
which is good.
He hasn't been arrested in 2 months. So he has 2 more months under his belt.
Positive. I just wanted to throw a shout out to our man Mike Tags. Mike Tagler, I love Tags. He had tweeted about Moncrief because I had brought him up. But in the last 2 years, he has seen 11 targets inside of the 10, which are those incredibly valuable.
Juicy.
Yeah, very juicy. Of those targets, he has scored 9 times.
9 times?
9 times.
On 11 targets?
Yeah.
It's pretty efficient.
Dear Andrew Luck.
I mean,
are you interested in throwing touchdowns this year?
Those are unbelievable numbers, and for those you're like, whoa, regression. That's over a couple years. This is what Moncrief is going to do, and if we can put together something between the 20s, just a little bit, Moncrief. That's all I want, just a little bit.
And you're not extrapolating proportionally, because I think I looked last year, and if you had extrapolated what Moncrief had done
per game,
given him the Julio Jones targets, it equated to like 40 touchdowns. So we're saying, hey, he's been really good. If he's just a little bit good in the red zone, but plays the whole year, wow, what could he do? All right, follow us on Twitter at the FF Ballers. Check out our YouTube channel if you want to watch the show.
YouTube.com/thefantasyfootballers.
Yeah, they know where to find YouTube, but
Well,
not
sure,
the
I'm
Fantasy
just saying,
Footballers.
we've got
That's smart. You can subscribe over there too,
Yeah, you can even turn on the notifications.
so you know when a new episode drops.
There you go.
Smart. Our fantasy community is jointhefoot.com. Become a part of the Foot Clan community. You can submit questions to the show on the website, thefantasyfootballers.com, and we love to answer those and help you with your team. And we always appreciate your iTunes reviews and subscribes over there on the podcast app. So, big highlight, guys. Before we get – we're going to jump right in, by the way.
I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
We're jumping right into the bounce backs. We're going to give you some bounce back candidates. But before we do that, big announcement. We're going to 3 shows a week next week.
Oh, yeah.
Tuesday, Thursday, as we've been doing. But a Saturday show is going to be dropping right into your pocket, into your podcast app. The Fantasy Footballers, 1 extra show per week in July. And then, in case you weren't aware, we ramp it up in August.
For half a year.
Yeah, from August through December, this show is 5 times a week. 6 if you are a member of
Join the Foot.
Join the
My
Foot.
goodness.
So, from what I understand, fantasy football is an entertaining and fun activity for you to spend your life on.
Well said.
Well said. All right, let's get into it.
Hello everybody, I am back.
Oh, there's a classic. There's a classic. All right, bounce back players. Well, Jason, summarize what a bounce back player is.
Sure. A bounce back player is a guy who has performed in the past in fantasy. He has shown that he can be a quality, important player for fantasy. But last year, they underwhelmed, whether that was they just stunk on the field, maybe they had some injuries, maybe they had things not go their way. Now it's like, okay, is that the new norm, or are there those players where that was the outlier and we expect them to bounce back? And so
Sure.
we've got 6 guys here today we think are going to have good seasons. Here's the great thing about a bounce back player. There is no player ever who has a bounce back type of season, meaning they've done it before, who's not an incredibly important draft day value. Because the fact that they have to bounce back means that people are afraid they're not going to, means that they had a crappy season last year. Those are the guys that year after year make such a difference for getting you to the championship.
If you're right on them,
right,
then it pays off in spades.
Well, I mean,
And hearts and clubs.
Yeah.
I think we're going to go 6 for 6 here, guys.
All right, Jason, why don't you kick it off? Who's your bounce back candidate?
Yeah, the first guy, because we just talked about him a second ago, it's Sammy Watkins. I am a believer that Sammy Watkins will bounce back. And you might go, well, bounce back to what? His best season was, I think wide receiver 17. But if you look at the career, here's what happened with Sammy Watkins. In 2014, there was one of the best wide receiver draft classes, if not the best wide receiver draft class of all time. You had Mike Evans, Kelvin Benjamin, Odell Beckham Jr. Sammy Watkins was drafted over all of those. The Buffalo Bills traded up.
They traded a first-round pick to move a couple spots to get him.
To get him at the 4th pick overall, because that's how good a player he is. He comes in his rookie year, almost gets 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, looks great, deals with some injuries. Sophomore year's coming in injured, has a problem with his foot. In the second half of that year, oh, my goodness.
Monster.
He was unbelievable. If you take that second half, which was, I believe, 9 games, he had 900 yards, 7 touchdowns during that span. If he did that for the whole season, you're talking 1,800 yards and 14 touchdowns.
It's also impossible.
No, well, I mean, yeah, but the point is his capability as a player from college has already been seen in the NFL. That's my point. He can beat guys bad. Matt Harmon's reception perception shows that he is a separator extraordinaire.
He can beat them.
So now,
badly.
So now the issue has been last year he had the foot problem. He's already had a surgery on his foot. Okay, this is very common, not just in the NFL, but specific to NFL wide receivers. We said last year that there's worry with this injury.
Warning.
Because that injury is one of the most common in the NFL for a repeat occurrence. And so we gave those warning signs, and he struggled. You went into training camp, and he wasn't there. He wasn't able to get there. He sucked last year because of this foot problem. He didn't want to have the second surgery, but in January he had the second surgery. I'm giving the unwarning sign. If what would be
the unwarning?
The green light. The go symbol.
Giving an unwarning
sign.
A very on birthday to you.
Yes.
We've got an unwarning.
The unwarning signs abound with Sammy Watkins. Here's why. The repeat surgery, which last year we were basically calling for, that is very common, might happen. But when that surgery gets repeated, the wide receivers that have had that in the NFL, they come back and they succeed. Repeat foot surgeries have happened with this injury with Julio Jones. Anybody scared to draft Julio this
Sometimes.
year? Sure, but, I mean, where are you drafting?
But no, I'll still take him.
Emmanuel Sanders, Dez Bryant, Julian Edelman. These guys have had to get that repeat surgery, and then the problem's fixed. Now he was supposed to maybe be ready for training camp, and in training camp they're going to bring him along slowly. Okay, it's not being reported that he's ahead of schedule. He is. In OTAs, he was running first team. Okay, so this isn't reports. This is what you see.
Well,
now
he's the only wide receiver on the roster, right? So it's all
that's
all first
another
team.
benefit, right?
Sure.
You got Robert Woods gone.
Marquise Goodwin.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah, they brought in a rookie in Zay Jones, who I like. They've got the efficient Tyrod Taylor, who when we dove deeper this last year for fantasy football, he's great.
Yep.
I think Sammy Watkins has the type of ability that he could be top 5 even on this volume team. I am saying his foot will not be the injury this year. If he is re-injured, I think he is ready to have a full, not a full off-season program since he was, had surgery in January, but from training camp on, I love him. And right now he's going in the 4th round. He's the, 19th wide receiver off the board.
Sammy Watkins or Terrell Pryor?
Oh, Sammy Watkins all day for me.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
And
I have Pryor higher in my rankings, but Watkins is going to have to move up.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
cool. Bounce back candidate, Sammy Watkins. The unwarning has been distributed. Mike, who is your bounce back candidate for 2017?
I'm going to talk about another guy who had a foot problem. Jason talked about him, and that is Dez Bryant. It was an interesting year.
I thought you were talking about Rex Ryan for a second.
Rex Ryan. Oh, come on. Oh,
just move on. You're supposed to just proceed.
That took me a second
to proceed.
It's not a problem. He has
move on.
Choices. So Dez Bryant
might be a problem. We make no judgment.
Dez Bryant. Yeah, exactly. Dez Bryant. Interesting year. Thought it was going to be Tony Romo, an elite level quarterback, but instead you get stuck with Dak Prescott, which turned out to be pretty amazing for that team. However, Dak was still a rookie, still learning the game, and Dez Bryant also dealt with some injuries. He missed 3 games. He missed weeks 4 through 6 last year. However, between weeks 2 and 15, yes, those 3 games he missed, 90 targets, 49 receptions, almost 800 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He also threw a touchdown, by the way, so you know that he's got that up his sleeve, just in case that has to be called upon. Here's the thing about that. His pace for the season was 131 targets if he had played all 16 games. 131 targets, you think, well, that's pretty low. That's,
it's not
15, but that's like 15 to 17 range in targets. That's not outrageously high when you're thinking of a wide receiver 1. I want top 5.
Sure, if
targets.
you're talking top 5, yeah.
But Dez is not a high-volume guy.
Never has been.
In 2014, he was the wide receiver 4 on 136 targets. In 2012, the wide receiver 3 on 138 targets.
He's much more how I view Pryor, by the way, because you have to be realistic with target counts there. So it's a good comp.
Right.
It's a good comp.
And so his actual pace of production would have been 71 receptions, about 1,150 yards, and 12 touchdowns if you extrapolate everything out. And that's not to mention the playoff game. He was 9 for 132 with 2 touchdowns. Now, I know that the Packers secondary is not terrifying to anybody, but it's just the fact that Dez Bryant is very, very good. Please do not forget this.
Right.
The last couple years have been rough because he's gotten hurt.
Let me ask you a question. How much do you read into the fact that I think it was Scott Barrett who talked about Dez Bryant being one of the more DB dependent wide receivers, as in when he faces tough competition, his numbers go down. He's in a division where he has some tough, difficult matchups twice a year. Could that hold the bounce back up in your mind?
It could, but I don't
Josh Norman being one of them.
Yeah.
Who has shut him down.
I don't want Dez as my wide receiver 1.
Right.
But he's going in the back of the second, a wide receiver ninth wide receiver off the board. But he's already shown you that he can be a top 5 guy. Dak Prescott, in my opinion, has shown he's going to be a great quarterback. There could be some regression now that teams have an entire offseason. Let's figure out how to beat Dak. But I think that Dak Prescott is just good, and that offensive line and that running game creates a situation where Dez Bryant can thrive, and he will be your 2.
Sure.
You don't need him to give you
these
these
the
wide
ADP
receiver
rises.
numbers.
I moved Dez up too, but I worry about the ADP rising where we just talked about bounce backs being values. It may, if it keeps rising, it may go beyond
It could.
that.
But I
but
think
it probably
he'll
won't
stay.
move much.
I think
more.
he'll stay in the back.
I
of
do
the
think
second.
this, though. If he's in the back of the second, you probably are having him as your wide receiver 1 because you had an early first-round pick.
Yeah,
so
unless
maybe you went with one of those
no
3
RB or
studs.
something.
Right.
All right. Gonna move on. I'll give you my bounce back candidate before we do
I'll
that.
call him my wide receiver 1.5.
Sure.
Okay.
Because at the back of the second, you're going to get
You're
another
going to get another guy just the same.
another
tier.
1.5, and then we have a wide receiver 1 and a 2.
There you go.
We're good. We're good to go.
The math.
It
All
adds
right.
up.
Before we move on, want to thank Casper for sponsoring today's episode. I am a Casper owner. I absolutely love my Casper mattress. In fact, when we mentioned it on the show, by the way, I bought it before they were ever a sponsor of the show. When I mention it, we have Foot Clan that send me DMs on Twitter and say, okay, do you really like this mattress?
Is it
I'm
real?
like, yeah, I really like this mattress. And my wife, who's pickier than I am with mattresses, she wanted to find a new one. She settled on the Casper, and we've loved it ever since we bought it. It is an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. It has supportive memory foam, creates an award-winning sleep surface with just the right amount of sink and the right amount of bounce, which is perfect for a bounce-back episode. Perfect. So definitely check it out. They give you a 100-night free trial. Get $50 towards any mattress purchase by visiting www.casper.com/footballers and use the offer code footballers. So very easy. Casper.com/footballers. Check it out. Terms and conditions apply. Absolutely love the Casper mattress. Thanks for sponsoring the show.
We want to thank Pristine Auction for sponsoring the show. Foot Clan, you hear us all the time talking about Pristine Auction because it is the best.
You know them. You love them.
The best sports memorabilia site anywhere in known existence.
all
Not the
time.
second best.
Of
Not
all
the
time.
third best.
No, number 1.
Literally the history of mankind.
My Twitter feed is
Not hyperbolic whatsoever.
My Twitter
not.
feed is constantly full of people saying, Mike, thank you for showing me Pristine Auction because there's stuff on here. We're talking signed jerseys, and with Pristine Auction, you never worry. You never worry about the authenticity of the signature. They always use the best authenticators around, the most respected clients. And these jerseys, the prices that you can get for these jerseys, because it's an auction system and they have so much inventory going up every single day.
You can find jerseys signed by the player that are cheaper than buying the jersey at the store. It's
Absolutely.
ridiculous.
So if you haven't checked them out, please check them out. That's Pristine Auction, Pristine auction.com. Make a completely free account. Look around, and when you do that, make sure you say, hey, the footballers sent me, and just have a little peek ski.
Have a little peek ski. All right. Moving on. I'm going to give you my bounce back candidate, and I really am going to – I enjoy this because I know it's going to be a challenge to convince you both that
I don't know
you
who this
should
is.
buy in
Good luck.
on Doug Martin
Oh,
as
all
a
right.
bounce back candidate.
Let's do
So
it. I'm open. My ears are open.
And I'm going to make my case. And here's where it begins. And Doug Martin, part of this is he's being drafted in the back of the 4th round, okay? And we understand, let's put it out there, he's going to miss 3 games.
Yeah, maximum of so
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the math here real
16
quick.
minus 3. You can't do 16 minus 3.
Well, I was
Well, it's not
thinking, I'm like, well, I
16,
got to
'cause you got
factor
the-
in the 17th and then the
well,
bye
the
week.
playoffs.
Well,
Playoffs usually start in week what?
You
14?
play
Yes.
16 games. I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, you
Okay.
don't make the playoffs.
So
You're not
here's
playing.
the funny thing, and we talk about the consistency of Doug Martin. And the funny thing about not playing football, which has been part of his career, is that you don't score touchdowns and you do not gain yards when you do not play football. So that's step one that
Shout
I
out
want
to my man Keenan Allen.
Exactly. So we hear a lot about the inconsistency about Doug Martin's career. We talked yesterday on the or 2 days ago on the show. We talked about, okay, he's either had a 400-yard season or a 1,400-yard season. He's done the 1,400 two different times in 2012 and 2016, 15. But it's been due to health. That's the real situation for Doug Martin. He played 16 games in 2012. He had 1,400 yards. He played 16 in 2015. He had 1,400 yards. In between years, torn labrum, had surgery, missed 5 games with ankle and knee injuries, and then he missed 6 games with a hamstring strain. And so here's what's built into the Doug Martin bounce back for me. You have fear and you have doubt about Doug Martin, and that is reflected in his ADP, his average draft position. You have the suspension. That's built into his ADP. Maybe I think both of you would think it needs to be more built into it.
I'm
it needs
actually
to be
shocked.
further back.
I'm shocked that he's a 4th-round pick.
Here's the thing.
Disgusting.
If he's healthy, I believe he'll bounce back, and that's what it comes down to. And the thing about Martin is this. He is very, very high upside. He's top 5 running back upside if the reins are handed back to him, and there's 100% risk. I mean, there is risk with Doug Martin, but I believe it's health. I don't believe it's talent. And here's what I know about that offense. We all like Tampa's offense, do we not?
Yes.
Do we not think that they're a potent offense?
I think they're pretty good. Their offensive line is not that great.
We already know, though, if you look at the backfield in Tampa, we've heard all the buzz about Doug Martin. And he's been one of the players where actually when the preseason buzz was there 2 years ago, it was 100% spot on. We watched him in the preseason. We said, whoa, he looks a little different.
Yeah.
That buzz is back with him. We saw what Charles Sims was as a lead back. He wasn't a lead back. That's done. I know Jaquiz Rogers had a very, very good year.
He was better than Martin.
Yes, he was better than Martin. Listen, though. Just 120 carries, okay? 120 carries for Jaquiz Rogers. His career average yards per carry is 3.8, and if you take out last year, the 5 previous years combined, his career average is 3.6. Martin isn't even in that. I mean, he's in a different stratosphere. He's a career 4.2 runner. In his healthy years, he's a 4.7 runner. And Jeremy McNichols, the rookie, is not taking the job. So for me, you look at the draft, you guys complain about ADP. Well, here's ADP. You want Doug Martin, top 5 upside, or you want C.J. Anderson, or LeGarrette Blount, or Ty Montgomery, or Carlos Hyde? And I personally am taking Doug Martin over all 4 of those players. So that's my case for the Doug Martin bounce back. If he's healthy, I believe he will be a frontline starting fantasy wide receiver. And so let's say I've spent my first 3 picks elsewhere, and I want to grab an upside guy like Martin, and I want to pair him with either Jaquiz later to really be in protective mode with Doug Martin, because you can get Jaquiz late, or Terrence West, who will start the beginning of the year and give you some production. Carlos Hyde, I don't know if he's a guy that he's not late enough to be that fill-in, but that's my case for Doug Martin as the bounce back. I know some of you out there, you're going to say, hey, I don't want to touch him. That's fine. You don't want to touch him. I understand that, but I think he can be a top 5 back.
Having a top 5 upside, which is 100% legitimate with Doug Martin. Nobody could argue against the upside capabilities. He's done it. It does prove to be valuable if he comes back and he's that. You're not going to
Is C.J. Anderson top 5 upside? LeGarrette Blount?
I think C.J. Anderson is top 10 upside.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Top 10 for sure.
Okay, but Blount? Montgomery?
No, but what I was going to say
but they're going to play the first 3 weeks.
What I was going to say about that, though, is when you name those players, now I realize all the more why Doug Martin, you think, oh, maybe he should be in the 6th, 7th, 8th. Now I realize why he's in the 4th.
He's in the 4th.
Because there's just garbage at those are your 4th-round running backs, people. And this is why
there's players with a lot of warts and worry and question marks.
And so, I mean, for me, the whole idea of grabbing not getting a running back early, it just seems so
that's the lesson
year.
You got out of my argument was I want to not draft any of these 5 guys
That's exactly
if I can avoid it. So, all right, let's move on. Jason, give us your second bounce back candidate for today's show.
So I went the double wide receiver route today. My other bounce back is a guy that I argued against you on.
This is so weird, man.
This
is like my love of Moncrief this year.
I know.
It just changes.
Yeah, from year to year things change, and that's the whole point of a bounce back player. Jeremy Maclin, the dirty cake himself, who is now a delicious banana cream pie.
He's a tasty cake.
Yeah. Tasty cake.
That's smart. That was well done.
So
I wish I believed you.
It's unbelievable to me that you don't buy into Jeremy Maclin, since the reason why you argued for Jeremy Maclin in Kansas City, if I remember correctly, is that he is a good wide receiver, right?
That was a while ago.
That was 3 years ago.
You got it.
No. 3 years ago, he was a top 10 wide receiver in Philadelphia. Okay?
Sure.
So then 2 years ago, when he went to Kansas City, I was saying, look, this offense cannot support a wide receiver. That's why I didn't like him. He was a top 15 wide receiver in Kansas City. That was 2 years ago. Then last year, he got injured.
44 for 536 and 2 touchdowns.
He was
limited
worthless.
work.
He was worthless, limited
and
work.
Clearly, Andy
injured.
Reid determined he was worthless as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, their cap situation. Their cap situation is nightmarish for Kansas City. So now you have Jeremy Maclin, a guy who 2 out of the last 3 years has been a top 15 wide receiver on 2 different teams, one of which was Aaron Rodgers' stinkfest, no production for wide receivers historically. Now he goes to Joe Flacco, who can throw the routes that he's good at. Here's a quote from Matt Harmon out of the Reception Perception about Maclin's time with the Kansas City Chiefs. He said,
Harmon is a hack.
Yes.
Take that, Harmon. Yeah.
Maclin's success rates on the out, the 9, the flat, and curl are some of the best recorded this year. If anything, Maclin's assignment in the Chiefs.
When was that?
That's in this year's Ultimate Draft Kit.
No, I mean, but what?
This
based
is
on the film from last year?
From last year, yeah. If anything, Maclin's assignment in the Chiefs offense somewhat restricts what he can do vertically. Joe Flacco can take advantage of that. You've got a wide receiver who's 29 years old. This is not old, 31, 32. Now you're starting to say this is an old wide receiver. A 29-year-old who's been a top 15 wide receiver for 2 different teams, 2 of the last 3 years, who's now going to a team where Joe Flacco's #1 target has always been on pace for 130-plus targets.
I was going to say, if he doesn't get 120 targets,
I'll be blown away.
I'll be shocked.
So Maclin, to me, right now is being drafted, in the 9th. He's risen now that he's gone to Baltimore. But what's crazy is when I look at the expert consensus rankings of people out there, he's the consensus like wide receiver 45.
You want to know why?
Because they're making a mistake. Yeah, I already know why.
It's possible. But the reason why is because everybody – I don't have any problem with any of the compelling arguments you just made. If you want to say that he's the one, I am not willing to hand Jeremy Maclin the lonesome one role on that team with Wallace and Perryman and Woodhead, who I believe Woodhead will probably lead the team in receiving yards. So
that's a hot take.
If he was the one,
there's no way he could lead them in receiving yards, right?
No, I believe he could.
What?
I believe he could. I believe the leading receiver on that team, due to distribution, could have 900 yards.
Okay. So
that's a high. I mean, that's Danny. You must have Danny Woodhead very high.
You must have Maclin in like the 70s.
No,
the 1970s.
No, because I can give him 850 yards, which is what I and all the consensus experts that you're talking about have done.
Yeah. Well, this is good news, Foot Clan, because what this means is Maclin is going to stay where he's been. I mean, I've been doing live drafts.
But this sucks to have to talk about Maclin
I've
this
been
way,
doing
I love him.
live drafts right now where the news is, it's not super fresh. Maclin is still going draft after draft in the 9th round. And I think he's pretty much a locked and loaded wide receiver too. I'm not saying he bounces back to a top 10 wide receiver. I don't see that.
That's going back
But he's going to
ways.
be a wide receiver 2 this year, and he's being drafted as a wide receiver 4 or 5 late in drafts. He's one of my favorite guys. So I think he bounces back. His talent has gone nowhere. He's a great wide receiver and in a much better situation.
Sure.
With
Makes
a chip
sense.
on his shoulder. Give me a boot.
Yeah, stay healthy, Jeremy.
Yeah, I like it. I'm with Jeremy Maclin on the Team Mac attack.
I can't believe this.
I know, that's so funny.
Twilight Zone stuff.
We were
if I had a Twilight Zone drop, I'd play it right now.
Yeah.
I feel like you just chose him so that I'd have to be depressed the rest of the afternoon.
Sucker.
I'm going to jump in here with a guy that I'm calling for a bounce back, but this has to come with a great warning. A great warning, because I'm talking about big.
Not an unwarning, but an actual warning.
This is a big red flag warning, and that's Big Ben Roethlisberger. I think that there is a massive bounce back coming for him. However, before I get into that, I just want to throw it out. He's still being drafted as the quarterback 9, which the bounce back has to be pretty extreme.
What was he? What did he finish last year?
I don't
Like
have
17 or something?
18 maybe?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but it wasn't great. So, but the way that people are drafting with him, they're kind of agreeing that the bounce back is here. But a lot of experts are not as high on Big Ben as I am.
18.
So here's what happened with Big Ben in 2013. He was the quarterback 11. He was a QB 1. 2014, he was a quarterback 5. That's called the Martavis Bryant jump. And Martavis Bryant was the wide receiver 20 in points per game through championship weekend. In 2015, Big Ben only played 12 games, but his pace was over 5,000 yards, almost 30 touchdowns. And in that time, Martavis Bryant, through championship week, was the wide receiver 13 in points per game. Of course, we haven't seen the full Martavis Bryant season yet, but I think that we're going to see it this year. Now, 2016, that's when you saw things kind of fall apart. The Big Ben only played 14 games again. That's also another giant red flag with Big Ben is the health. But what I want to say is I think he does bounce back. He does bounce back. So if you can see him falling in drafts, you know, that's why I want to bring this up, is you could be in a league where people are like, I'm writing off Big Ben. And he's all of a sudden Big Ben is dropping to the 10th in your home league. I'm fine. I'm great drafting Big Ben right there. He is a great quarterback to have in best ball.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. I think he is, because in a home league it's really tough. If he's in the 10th, so what? You can cut him. You can stream him.
Yeah.
You do whatever. But in best ball, he's great because his monster games
they're humongous.
Yeah,
and this is also my call in here. Buy Martavis Bryant. That's what I am pushing this narrative. Buy Martavis Bryant while you can, because I think it's going to be impossible to buy him after a couple weeks of this season. And just to go along with the warnings, I know there's a lot of warnings here for a guy I'm calling a bounce back, but he's just going too early in drafts. He's ahead of Kirk Cousins. He's ahead of Dak Prescott. So I just want to say, if he is falling in your draft, draft him.
Well, and to your defense, saying Big Ben's going to bounce back doesn't have to speak to ADP value at all.
right.
You're just saying that maybe you're just giving validation to the people drafting him at QB9 by saying you believe he's going to bounce back. I mean, it doesn't have to be
A draft day value.
a draft day value to be a bounce back. And so I think you've made a compelling case, and Big Ben at least has done it before. I mean, he had back-to-back years where I believe he finished,
11 and 5.
11 and 5. So, and we've seen him have those weeks even in his bad years where he has, 2 5-touchdowns weeks. Here's my last bounce back. We'll conclude this, do some mailbag. Probably have to sell you on this guy as well. But look, Adrian Peterson is my second bounce back candidate. And so the first question I have to you is, because I hear, he's done. And Jason, he makes the comparison to Arian Foster.
Oh, I'm going too soon.
Well, and that's why I'm preemptively striking. Look, is 37 carries split across 2 parts of the season enough to say Adrian Peterson's done? Because that's what he had last year, 37 carries. And, yes, the yards per carry was pitiful. We know the offensive line was pitiful. We know he got injured. But that's what you have to figure out as a fantasy owner. You have to decide, is 37 enough to tell you that he's done? And if he's not done, if he's not Arian Foster, I think he's a stud, and I think he's a value. He's never played a full season and not been an RB1. That's never happened in his career. So we have not hit that point yet where he's played a full season and not been an RB1. And so the question is he done? He's 32 years old.
That's old.
2,400 career carries. But you could make an argument that the wear and tear, he had a full year off. He's had a year off with injury before. You could say he's more in the 30 range as a runner. Plus, we all, I think, are willing to admit Adrian Peterson's a freak.
Yes.
Oh,
there is no one else in the NFL that you have a right to compare Emmitt Smith or Curtis Martin to. But I think it's in the realm of completely fair to say that about Adrian Peterson. Curtis Martin ran for 1,700 yards when he was 31 years old. And so I put him in that freak category. And the last piece of the bounce-back puzzle for me, going beyond, you hear camp and they love him and they say he looks amazing, is the team he joined, okay, and the coach he's playing for. Number 1 in the league in yards last year. This is New Orleans, right? But let's go back. Let's look at the rushing yards. Last 3 years, I mean, you might as well print the same numbers every year in terms of what they do on the ground. Touchdown totals for the team. Rushing touchdowns, 15, 14, 14. So now you have to ask, where do those go?
Sure.
They have 15, 14, 14. How does that split with Ingram? You know, the rushing totals have been consistent for that roster. How do you split 1,700 rushing yards on the ground amongst Ingram and Peterson? And 15 touchdowns. So for me, I'm going with the Hall of Famer. I'm splitting those in his direction. He's a double-digit touchdown possibility guy in that kind of an offense with the oddities from the head coach when it came to Tim Hightower and the weird things he's done with Ingram.
Oh, he hates Mark Ingram.
I mean,
that's on the record.
Ingram might have the third down job. I mean, I'm not willing to just give it to Kamara as a rookie. It could be first and second down Adrian Peterson. Third down, a mix of Ingram and Kamara, and then Ingram spells AP. That's how I'm statting it. I have AP higher than Ingram, and I believe he's a bounce-back candidate as well, and I just think he's a freak. And look, if you had dropped him on Cleveland as a free agent, well, actually, that would have been pretty good. That would have been pretty good.
That's a nice line.
That was my default line. But if you
Jets.
Sure. Yeah, if you
go.
dropped him on the Jets or even on a team like, that just doesn't have the kind of offensive prowess that New Orleans does, I might have more hesitation. But I think he's going to have the opportunity. So if the first few weeks go well for Adrian Peterson, unlike Arian Foster last year.
Didn't the first week go well for Arian Foster?
Sort of. He scored. But I don't even think his yards per carry were very good. But
No,
yeah, at 37 carries, you're not ending the career of Adrian Peterson on 37 carries.
It's always difficult to argue against Adrian Peterson, the player. You're usually going to lose that argument because he has proven it over and over. People are saying he was too old, and then he had
too injured
to come back, and then 2015 he was the second best running back. Your point is well taken. I believe that he is being overdrafted. I don't think he is at 32 years old, coming off of the injury previously seen in a super small sample, just not being that good. I don't believe he is going to show that he's still the Adrian Peterson. It's just hard for me to believe. What I do think, and this was what you alluded to a minute ago, it dawned on me last year. I was like, last year Jay Ajayi, who is a good running back, got kicked to the curb because Arian Foster came to town, the vet who had been so good for so long, and every report out of camp was just Arian Foster turning heads. Arian Foster is the man. Arian Foster is going to take over, and he skyrocketed, and Jay Ajayi plummeted. And if you look at what's happening to the ADPs, it just reminds me so much. If Adrian Peterson is who he's been in his career on the Saints, he's going to be great. I'm not calling for that, but I do think Mark Ingram, who is continuing to plummet, is down in the 8th round, is a great running back.
Now?
Yeah, he's
So,
down in the 8th. He's
simple-
a great running back.
And I'll take the ADP out because I already know the answer. But simple question for you. Let's say you paid the same cost for Ingram and Peterson. Who do you think has the better fantasy year?
I have Mark Ingram ahead in my rankings right now, and I certainly think he'll have a better
Mike?
season.
I believe that I also have Mark Ingram ahead a little bit.
All right.
I do. And
Hey, take it for what you will. Our job on this show is to give you information to make your decision. So if you buy into any of these bounce-back candidates, maybe it helps you in your draft. Certainly, you should buy into mine.
I would between your two guys, we're both 4th-round guys.
Yeah, they are.
100% I would go Adrian Peterson in this situation. Not just the 3 games, but of the upside that is Peterson on one of the highest-scoring teams
You're
in
saying
the league.
all day you would go?
I would.
All day?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to get into the mailbag, answer some listener questions.
Mailbag.
Yeah. That's right. If you have a question, you can go to the website, thefantasyfootballers.com, click the Submit a Question button. You can also dial our voicemail hotline, 302-464-TFFB. Keep those short and to the point, and we'll get them on the show, and we'll answer them and try to help you out. So let's look here at Brandon in Phoenix.
Oh.
Bonjour.
Wait, no, stop. In a vacuum, who do you take with a 7th-round pick in a half-point per reception league? Do you take Amir Abdullah, Willie Snead, or Dante Moncrief? 7th-round pick.
So usually this comes down to roster construction. So I like the way that he took that answer away from us and said it can't be who do I need, the consistent guy, the high upside, just in a vacuum.
Well, in a vacuum, in that case, you're just pretty much saying, hey,
who's
it's your only
going to
pick.
be the best
Let's
player
bet on
this
one.
year? And if I had to bet on one, I would bet on Willie Snead this year. I just think I bet on volume. That's usually where I go. And while Dante Moncrief, I believe, has a much higher ceiling than Willie Snead because of touchdowns, which is, always what ends up with those high upside guys, I'm going to bet on volume, so I would take Snead.
And I'm going to lean Abdullah here.
I'd take Amir Abdullah.
Yeah, a half-point league, I think he'll have some volume there in the passing game, and I'll take the running back. So
if Amir Abdullah plays 16, he's a running back 2 at the worst.
Okay.
That's probably true.
If I go to astronaut school, I get to be an astronaut. But
no, that's not true.
But he's
you
not
can
going
fail.
to astronaut school.
Yeah. Amir Abdullah is playing 16 games. You heard it here first, folks.
Put it on the board. All right, Luke in St. Louis. My league is a half-point per reception, 10-team league. Each team keeps one player. I have the first pick in the draft. Who should I keep? LaShawn McCoy for a second-round pick. Okay. Mike Gillislee for a 14th-round pick. It looks like the top 3 RB are available for him to draft, or Antonio Brown with that first pick. So he has all of those available. So what would you do with the pick?
Oh, man.
It's not hard for me. I would take LaShawn McCoy for the 2, and then that would free me up to take a great running back in the first round. Or if I want the wide receiver combo, I got Antonio Brown.
I'm taking Gilly.
Are you? That is shocking to me.
It's not. I have
every time we do these questions, you always take the earlier guy, and now you have one of your favorite players in LaShawn McCoy.
Yes.
That just speaks to your confidence in Gillislee, despite him switching teams.
Yes, it's the 14th round. I mean, this isn't.
That's a free player.
This isn't the 6th round. He's completely free, and you get to grab David Johnson and company.
Where do you stand on this?
And then have your second-round pick. And clearly there are good players still available in this draft.
Look, usually, I do lean on the go with your stud guys, and that would be draft one of those top 3 studs as you're planning on with your first round and take LaShawn McCoy. However, I think that Mike Gillislee in the 14th, and because you're giving up a second-round pick, you have to weigh in, okay, who could you get? Because Shady in the second's great.
Yeah.
I would love to get Shady in the second. But let's say you don't get Shady in the second. Who are you going to get with that second-round pick? Keep in mind, the keepers here, they cost for the round value. So you're really just getting a second-rounder. And if that ends up being a Dez Bryant, I would rather have Dez Bryant and David Johnson and Mike Gillislee than just a Shady and
DJ.
It just comes down to your confidence level in Gillislee.
Yes.
Because otherwise you're not trading, your Dez Bryant for your LaShawn McCoy. So if you have a decent level of confidence in Gillislee, then I understand it. I would take the stud. All right, dynasty trade question from William in Memphis. He said, which side wins this trade? All right. Tevin Coleman and Will Fuller for Tyreek Hill and Smash Jackson.
So Paul, that's Paul Perkins for those who are not aware.
Smash Jackson.
Greatest nickname
he
ever.
rebranded.
Tevin Coleman and Will Fuller.
Wow.
For Tyreek Hill and Smash Jackson.
No one won it going away. I mean, this is a fair trade. I think you could make arguments for both sides.
I do, and I'll take I feel like the Hill and Jackson side is more of a bird in the hand side. You have a starting job for Paul Perkins and the opportunity, and you know what Tyreek Hill has in terms of a lockdown job. Coleman and Fuller you might be waiting on. So I'm going to take the Hill Smash Jackson side.
Smash? I'm taking Hill and Smash Jackson as well.
Yeah, me as well. I expect Devonta Freeman to get a monster contract here soon, so the future of Tevin Coleman, maybe he'll still stick around, but it's not one of those like, in a year or two,
sure,
Tevin Coleman's going to take over. I don't think that's going to happen. And Tyreek Hill, his future says he's going away from Alex Smith, the dink and dunk, to maybe a guy who can, explode down the field with him.
You can explode.
We're going with that.
Explode down the field with him. He works to get down the field. All right. Andy in Green Bay.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Last question here. I can keep 2 players in a 14-team point per reception league. Mike Evans is the no-brainer, but who would you pick between Melvin Gordon and Michael Thomas? That's an easy one for me. It's Melvin.
Me as well, Melvin Gordon.
Melvin?
Melvin.
Melvin?
To me, there are 8, maybe 9, if you include Jordan Howard, running backs that are presumably, I mean, we're going to be wrong. Some of them will bust. But presumably those locked and loaded, 3-down type of back, or at least enough production to say you're going to be a stud if you play 16 games. Melvin Gordon is one of those players to me. If you've already got Mike Evans, I'm gonna pair him up.
Thomas in a PPR.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas should be 90 receptions.
You still need running backs in a PPR.
I don't know. I get it, but it's a PPR. I can find. I can draft Danny Woodhead, who is apparently going to lead the Ravens in receiving yards. I can get that RB1 in the 8th round.
Did I say he would or he could?
You said he would, I thought. We're going to have to check the tape.
No, we don't need to check the tape because I'm going to go with could.
Okay. That's
okay.
Still.
All right, fair.
But the fact that those guys exist and it's PPR, they still get that bump, even if they're catching 4 passes for 50 yards. I mean, that's a highly usable running back. And to have Thomas and Evans,
I'm going Gordon.
I would lean with I'm gonna take Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I'm still gonna go.
All right,
2-2. If it's a 2-2 flex, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers flex, I'm going Melvin Gordon. If it's 3 wide receivers, then maybe you could talk me into it.
All right, hey, if you want to explode down the field with your draft, check out the Ultimate Draft Kit at ultimatedraftkit.com. That is the our off-season labor of love. It is filled with so many draft day goodies, you won't believe it. Check it out. The fantasy finish charts alone that we just recently added are just great to look at. I tweeted one the other day about Antonio Gates. Gives you great instant perspective visually.
He's also been very good.
Yeah, on players. So check that out at ultimatedraftkit.com. The second you go to the website, you get access to it right away, and you get access throughout the offseason all the way through your draft. And we think it'll help you set the right foundation for your team heading into 2017.
Get those hashtag Foot Clan titles.
Yeah, that's right. And, hey, like I said before, next week we're going to 3 shows a week, which means fantasy football time. I mean, it's even more.
We are close.
It's even more upon us. So thank you very much for listening, supporting the podcast. We will be back next Tuesday. See you later.
Yep, and then you can check out fantasyjocks.com if you want to grab a trophy. Our promo code is FOOTBALLERS. Goodbye.
People. See ya.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Join our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.